When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With Twin Spires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with Twin Spires. And now you can race to victory with Twin Spires tournaments.
Nick Tammaro here, back for the Racing Roundtable, and joined by my esteemed colleagues, James Scully and Vance Hanson. We're going to touch on a few of the big spots from last weekend. Gentlemen, we are headed towards the Breeders' Cup. We've got some hot and heavy action coming up. We're going to talk about some 3-year-olds to get things started. Among the highlights, we'll talk about Thorpedo Anna and her Horse of the Year candidacy, pertaining specifically to if she wins the Breeders' Cup Distaff, as well as some takeaways from the Pennsylvania Derby. And of course, we all want to know what else caught your eye on the weekend. There is no reason to wait. Let's get right into it and start talking about Thorpedo Anna and her win in Saturday's Cotillion, yet another Grade 1 win for the incredible Kenny McPeak trainee, who of course won the Kentucky Oaks back in May, followed it up with wins in the Acorn, Coaching Club American Oaks, a narrow miss in the Travers, and now a Cotillion. James, overall Thorpedo Anna thoughts, and specifically on point, what would her Horse of the Year candidacy look like if she can take down a Breeders' Cup Distaff win?
Well, if she wins the Breeders' Cup Distaff, she's going to need some help. Fierceness and Dornick are both multiple Grade 1 winners this year. Both of them have an important win, with Fierceness capturing the Travers and Dornick the Belmont Stakes. So she's not going to back into Horse of the Year honors if Dornick or Fierceness wins the Classic. Somebody else might want to argue Forever Young or another horse, but there's definitely some horses in the Classic field that can go take the title themselves. So, but she also has the options, Nick and Vance, to just go take it. I mean, the Classic is still a possibility for her. I thought that, I think her performance in the Travers, I think she was on the worst part of the track that day on the inside, and she got beat by a diminishing head at a mile and a quarter distance by Fierceness. I think that performance shows she's good enough to be competitive and win the Classic. But she's definitely going to have to bounce back from this effort in the Cotillion. I think running her back on 4 weeks rest after that race at Saratoga was too quick. And, Kenny McPeak didn't think it was going to be an issue, but it turned out to be. She basically didn't get a good trip in this race. Looked like she was fighting the track, never really extended her stride like we've seen in the past, but she gutted out a narrow win. So I give her all the credit in the world for winning this race at less than her best. I'll take the positive view of it and say she's a candidate to bounce back with a huge effort in her next start, whatever race that is. And if she goes to the Distaff, she won't control her destiny for Horse of the Year honors.
Vance. So Vance, twofold part of it. First, what did you think of this performance? And then secondarily, how do you feel about the Horse of the Year question should she win the Distaff?
Yeah, I thought this was a pretty gutsy performance. I mean, the track was playing fairly deep and tiring. They had her boxed in on the inside, not giving her an opportunity to get through when she was ready to get through. So she showed a lot of class to overcome some major obstacles to win this race. And although she did cut it pretty close, won by only about a head, you can tell right here that he's not asking her to go all out here, and she doesn't require a lot of urging by Brian Hernandez to stick her head out in front. And so she won it fairly comfortably in the end over an overmatched rival. So under the circumstances, I thought that was a pretty good effort. If she wins the Breeders' Cup Distaff, undoubtedly she's going to have a very vocal wave of support among racing media and fandom to be Horse of the Year. It still doesn't mean, however, she would be the best and most qualified candidate. Ran a remarkable race in the Travers, as James noted, but at the end of the day, it was still a loss against the top 3-year-old colt at present, Fierceness. And even assuming she wins the distaff, she would not have come close to transcending her division this season in the manner that Rachel Alexandra did 15 years ago. In my opinion, the standards for earning Horse of the Year honors haven't so much evolved as they've been watered down during the past 25, 30 years. That's not to say most of the Horse of the Year selections since have not been worthy winners. A vast majority have been, but some of the more competitive when the Eclipse Award electorate removed Horse of the Year favorite Trick, who was a 2-year-old colt. He had a good season, but he was unable to race outside his division, and that was a very vintage year, as you guys remember, for older males and for 3-year-old colts. So once that decision was made to vote a 2-year-old colt as Horse of the Year in that kind of a season, that left the barn door wide open for other questionable choices in future years. So obviously, Thorpedo Anna has already wrapped up her 3-year-old filly title, but for me personally, I have no expectation of writing her name in as Horse of the Year, regardless of what happens in the Breeders' Cup.
Well, so are you saying, Vance, that if Thorpedo Anna wins the distaff in Fierceness, who's either going to be the favorite or the second choice in the wagering, wins the Classic, you think there's like a reasonable chance or any chance out there that the voters will vote Thorpedo Anna over Fierceness?
Well, I suppose that's one exception, but I think she's already got a significant fan base. Kenny McPeak, after the cotillion, is already banging the drum for her candidacy. So I think there's going to be a bit of a segment out there, and it's also going to depend on, in this theoretical question you've posed to me, how impressively Fierceness were to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. So obviously there wasn't much separating the two of them in the Travers, so I could see Thorpedo Anna perhaps getting some notable segment of the votes for that.
If Fierceness wins the Classic by nose, I'll take all the money in the world, like a fast diminishing nose. I'll take all the money in the world on him against Thorpedo Anna if she wins the distaff. I give her no chance, but I could be wrong.
Well, I would say he would probably be a 90-10 favorite to win that title under that situation. I'm just saying that Thorpedo Anna has generated a huge fan base this year. She's undefeated, doesn't have or not undefeated, but undefeated in her division. So and this basically goes back to my primary point that there is a wave of popularity in these races, much more so. It's looked at a lot more subjectively than it was many years ago, and I think the voting electorate looked at races like this a lot more objectively.
I'm old enough to remember a male horse defeating a female horse by a small margin, and in the biggest and most important race of the year, and not winning Horse of the Year. It happened under the Twin Spires of Churchill. But I will draw the ire of many, many people if I continue on with that kind of conversation. So I agree with you with the sentiments completely. I mean, I don't, as you said, James, if Fierceness wins the Classic by a diminishing nose in 207, I don't think it matters. The fact that he won the head-to-head matchup with Thorpedo Anna will be enough to put everybody in that direction. Now, there's no denying that if she were to win a race like the Breeders' Cup Distaff against the likes of Idiomatic, Adair Manor, doesn't look like Adair Manor's Breeders' Cup candidacy looks all that great at the moment. But if she were to do that, it would definitely be a major feather in her cap and would obviously increase the likelihood that some people might trend that direction for Horse of the Year voting. But I couldn't see myself doing it. I don't have a vote, but there's no way if Fierceness or even Dornoch, potentially, or even a horse like one that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, though he's a bit more far-fetched in terms of getting it done. So, my general cotillion opinion, I don't really necessarily buy into the rough trip part of it. I know it was a bit of an uncomfortable trip in a way, but all things considered, she got out with plenty of time left. She had dead aim on the winner. I do think that Brian Hernandez was a little probably less encouraging in terms of what he was asking her for than he had in the past. I think he knew exactly what it would take to get the job done, and he didn't ask her for much more than that. I don't necessarily think there's a big argument that she's running at significantly less than top speed at this point, but I think it was akin to a pitcher winning when they don't necessarily have their best stuff. I think she probably came back a little bit quickly off a big performance, but is still clearly the class of the 3-year-old filly division. That's an understatement, but undoubtedly one of the top 4 or 5 horses in training right now. And when you can win and you don't really have your A game, I think that says a lot about you overall. Is that fair to say, James?
Oh, I think that's fair to say 100%. I know that like everybody's saying like distaff and just talking like it's a done deal that she'll be in the distaff. And that's what Kenny McPeak has been hit. That's what he was saying before the cotillion, and he wasn't changing his tune after it. But there's still so much time left that over the next 6 weeks or 5 weeks or however long till they pre-enter, that I expect her to be pre-entered to both races, even if the distaff is her first preference, and they still have plenty of time to change their mind. So I'm not looking at the distaff. I would say it's more likely, of course, right now, but I'm not looking like it's a done deal. I still think there's a chance that they're going to get together, and if she trains well, they're going to give the Classic some weight, and so they'll have a decision to make.
Vance brings up an interesting question. Would you consider it at all, and this is conjecture, we're way far out, would you consider it at all a negative if she doesn't pre-enter into the Classic in addition to the distaff?
No, I don't think so. I think Kenny McPeak looked at the Travers as a potential winning opportunity this year. She got very close, didn't quite get it done, but then once that was over, he immediately turned his attention back to running again against fillies and mares. It's kind of like the movie made with Swiss Skydiver in 2020. He took that shot in the Preakness. He picked the right day to run her against the boys, but then there was really not much talk, I don't recall, of her running her again in the Breeders' Cup Classic at Keeneland. So this looks like a typical Kenny McPeak move with his top class 3-year-old filly.
She might be in the distaff, but I'm not buying that comparison. I mean, Swiss Skydiver wasn't like unbeaten in her division. In fact, she was coming off a third in the Kentucky Oaks when she won the Preakness. So yeah, to me, there's no comparing those two fillies.
Well, they're both going to be through. I mean, Swiss Skydiver wrapped up 3-year-old filly title honors in winning the Preakness. I mean, she wasn't going to
right, but they weren't like looking at the Breeders' Cup Classic like a race where they she was a viable win contender. I'm just like gauging the Travers through how well she ran against Fierceness, and could Fierceness win the Breeders' Cup Classic? Could she compete against Fierceness at a 1.25 miles? I think the Travers suggests that she can. But so I think they actually didn't have a decision to make with Swiss Skydiver, but they have one to make with Thorpedo Anna.
I don't think that's out of the realm. I can buy it. It'll be interesting to see as things shake out. Well, that was one of 2 grade ones at Parks on Saturday. Let's turn our attention to the other, which was the Pennsylvania Derby, won in wire-to-wire fashion by Preakness winner Seize the Gray, who I know I was delighted to see the connections go back to the tactics that helped them grab that Preakness win and him going straight to the front. Vance, for my money, it was advantageous to be inside throughout the day on the main track at Parks, and I think Seize the Gray also got away with a pretty soft pace on the front end. Am I being a little dismissive of his effort, or was he a bit better than that?
No, absolutely. You're not being dismissive. The race was formful enough from a betting perspective, but you do have to kind of wonder if the result would have been any different if the track hadn't been so deep and tiring, or if Seize the Gray had to work a little harder on the front end. 23 and change first quarter, half running 49 and change. He just got on the lead and was just left alone, and he just basically loped along on that racetrack. And, it was certainly a nice bounce back performance for the Preakness winner after a dull summer at Saratoga. But I emphatically disagree with those who think Seize the Gray put himself back into the discussion for, possible 3-year-old colt champion honors with this win. In the end, it was just too slow a performance to suggest he could back it up in either the Breeders' Cup Classic or Dirt Mile, whichever way the my racehorse and owners and D. Wayne Lucas want to go, and nor did it offset the severity of his losses in races like the Bluegrass, the Belmont, and the Jim Dandy against the more talented members of his crop. And I think we all kind of knew going into this race that this was not one of the more vintage renewals of the Pennsylvania Derby. The top two finishers both had Grade 1 credentials, but not so much the rest of the field. So, like I said, it was a nice bounce-back performance by Seize the Gray. He seized the lead from the start, set a very soft pace, and nobody could catch him on that kind of a racetrack.
James, did you feel any better about the Seize the Gray performance, or do you kind of share mine and Vance's sentiments?
Yeah, well, I share the sentiments, but I mean, I look at Jamie Torres at the start of that race, and he was going to go as fast as it took to make the lead. So I mean, the splits were slow, but I think he could have run faster early. And I just think this performance and the Preakness performance just show if he's going to win big Grade 1 races at 2 turns, he needs to be prominent and hustled from the starting gate. And I want to also give D. Wayne Lucas credit, because it had to be hard for him to bypass the Travers, seeing how big that race is and how much attention it was getting this year with Fierceness at Thorpedo Anna. But Seize the Gray was just completely flat in the Jim Dandy, and not only was he really well beaten in fourth, but he just couldn't show his speed from the gate. So, I mean, that was just a terrible performance on multiple levels. I think it was a really smart move to skip the Travers and freshen them up for this Pennsylvania Derby. And they did what they needed to do to get to the front, and then, had another gear left to here a little bit. He's going to face a class hike, but I think the one thing that this race does is that the tactics in the Breeders at Del Mar are going to be pretty simple. Hustle him as hard as you can from the starting gate, try to get on the lead, and try to steal the race. So I think that Seize the Gray, by him winning the Pennsylvania Derby, definitely solidified any pace concerns we're going to have in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. There's a little discussion about him potentially going to the Dirt Mile instead of the Classic. I can't imagine they convinced the coach of doing that. He's going to want to be in the big dance for sure, especially as he sat out the Travers, which you alluded to. One of the things I was going to bring up when I was briefly mentioned to be on the jury on Thursday before Blaze left me at the altar was that I thought Dragoon Guard was one of the biggest fades in the history of racing. This was a horse I had no interest in whatsoever. And when he didn't break quickly and Jamie Torres seized the edge, pun intended, like both of you alluded to, that really ended it to me. And when he was able to back that second quarter down, this is a horse that we know can kick on when he's confronted. And so, it is. You can certainly acknowledge that Seize the Gray is kind of a fun horse who's won a couple of Grade 1s, while also feeling like he has won probably the most watered down Grade 1s in this entire division post Kentucky Derby, including the Kentucky Derby and afterwards. Those two items are not mutually exclusive. I think that's the camp that I find myself in. I don't consider many of them in here real candidates for any meaningful races at the Grade 1 level through the rest of the year. I could maybe see a horse like Stronghold go into a race like the Clark or something later in the year that's maybe a little bit lesser and being effective, because he's now run well a couple of times. They're all going to have to get faster to be effective handicap horses next year, and that certainly does include Seize the Gray. James, we're going to touch on a couple of what else options. I know you wanted to mention kind of some of the ones that I did. Where are we heading on the what else?
Okay, well, I'll start with the Sacrosanct. That colt is poised to join the Kentucky Derby trail, I would imagine, at his next start. He improved to two for 2 on Saturday. He won a restricted maiden at Saratoga by Open Lens in mid-August. Came back on Sunday in the Bertram F. Bongard Stakes at 1 16 for New York breds, and really, won with complete authority. Manny Franco really looking around, trying to do as little as possible with this Honest Mischief colt. There's definitely some speed in that female family, but he's out of an unbridled song mare, and Honest Mischief, I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a good side just because of his pedigree with the End of Mischief and being out of Honest Lady. And this is a promising 2-year-old based on this performance. These are kind of races that these state breds, Smarty Jones was running against Pennsylvania breds early in his career. And so I don't look at, I think this was a real big effort from Sancrosanct. And he's one to watch wherever he shows up next, whether Brad Cox keeps him at Oaklawn for races like the Jerome and Withers or goes to Fairgrounds or Oaklawn.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He was a very impressive winner of the Bongard at 7/8. He was a little bit slower, actually, than one of the fillies that won earlier on the card, which I think we'll talk about next.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I said a mile and a 16.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I was here with my hand on the button to correct you. Don't worry. With the Angels, actually won the opener on Sunday in the Joseph Gemma, which I think we're going to take a look at now. So with the Angels, a second-time starter from the Linda Rice barn, who had been a really impressive debut winner. One thing that you're going to notice about both of these victories is that they were earned on the front end, and there was a pretty clear speed and I would say more inside bias at Aqueduct on Sunday afternoon. Now, with the Angels, was really never on the rail. She's also never asked until inside the 8th pole before Jose Ortiz just basically keeps her busy, and she pulls away very nicely here, winning in 124.04 in a tremendous performance. This might be enough for her to go to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. I'm not going to lie. And if she can get into the field, she might be really dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, a pair of just real runaway wins. Both youngsters look good. We're promising New York breds for sure. I'll also mention real quick, Nick, Batten Down, bounced back on Saturday. I want to give him a little bit of credit. Once he, in the Travers, he got over to the rail. I think, I talked to a guy who's pretty sharp on Saturday before the races, and he was telling me that rail was dead on Travers Day. And he was telling me, that horse like Bookham Dano, he rallied for third up the rail, and Batten Down was on the rail.
Fava is one that comes to mind also.
Yeah, and so, this is a very encouraging performance. He could come back for the Clark as well in late November. He's shown an affinity for Churchill Downs, breaking his maiden by nearly 10 lengths on Derby week, and then rebounding with set a new track record. That mile and 3/16 distance isn't used that often, but the number came back strong on that effort. So that was a big bounce back performance by Batten Down, a son of Tappet.
Yeah, let's have a little look at some of the info you got from Junior Alvarado after that win aboard Batten Down. Full brother to the one and only Tacitus.
There took some early pressure out there, but Batten Down just appeared to be traveling real easily. Just tell us about your trip today.
I got a good trip. I just think, he was the class of the race. He was going, pretty good pace, I will say. But he's a horse, he can do that. He can do that. And then, if you happen to give him a breather by the 3/8 pole, he take a nice deep breath there, and then, he will re-break again in the quarter pole, and that's what he showed today. 23:47 mile and 3:16. It wasn't really too fast for him. He took a break, like a breathing, like I said, and then, he finished up very nice without me really having to ask him much.
He broke his maiden by nearly 10 lengths here this spring, and then set a new track record for a mile and 3/16. He loves this track here, Churchill, doesn't he?
I think so. It might have something to do with the track a little bit too. That play off sometimes with some horses, and I can definitely say he definitely do love to running here.
And he's sort of a late blooming son, a 3-year-old son of Tappet. You really excited for this fall and next year as a 4-year-old? Do you think he'll keep progressing and getting better?
Yeah, I think the idea of running today in this company, just a little class relief, and I think, we're working with him. I think mentally, he hasn't still catch up with his body and his ability. So, I just think when he turns 4, hopefully he'll mature a little more, and hopefully he become what we always thought about him.
All right. Thanks so much, Junior. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to what's ahead in the future for Batten Down. That was a win in Saturday's Bourbon Flight. Vance, you're the international man of mystery, and so we are looking forward to what you have to tell us about your what else.
Well, my what else was Rebels Romance, the 2022 Breeders' Cup Turf winner, who appears to be back in the mix for the race this year after winning the Price von Europa at Cologne in Germany on Sunday. The Price von Europa prime time in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe in early October, which typically is run a week or two after the Europa. And this year was supposed to have some added intrigue because Goliath, the impressive King George winner at Ascot over the summer, was going to run in the Europa, but because as a gelding he was ineligible to compete in the ARC, but he suffered a minor physical setback and did not start. So that left Rebels Romance as a pretty heavy favorite here. He was 3-5 and perhaps didn't win like a 3-5 shot should, but his connections noted the pretty slow pace of this race made things a little more difficult for him. But in the end, he did eke out that win by a neck and showed his class over 1.5 miles. And, coming off of this race, I think he does deserve respect at Del Mar, having used this race as a stepping stone to his success at Keeneland a couple of years ago. He didn't, as some of you might remember, he had an off year last year, made a couple trips to the United States and had everything go wrong for him both at Saratoga and at Aqueduct. But he is back to his best form this year. He has Grade 1 wins in Dubai, Hong Kong, and Germany. His only loss this season was a distant third to Goliath in the King George, and the form of that race has really held up since. The filly that split those two at the wire was Blue Stocking, who came on and won the Prix Vermeil at Longchamp a couple of weeks ago. So that's a good race. And no horse has won the Breeders' Cup Turf twice in non-consecutive years, but I think Rebels Romance might have a chance, especially with most of Europe's leading lights pointing to other races in the fall and the American division being what it often is.
Yeah, the Godolphin contingent will put Silver Knot fourth in Saturday's Joe Hirsch Turf Classic Invitational, a Grade 1 coming up during the Belmont at Aqueduct meet. He'll meet Warlike Goddess, who won this race last year before a try in the Breeders' Cup Turf. But always interesting to get apprised a bit of the international doings headed towards Breeders' Cup time. Gentlemen, that just about concludes it for us. I don't think we have anything else to cover. James, Vance, anything you wanted to mention on the way out?
Oh, I did want to mention next, real quick. Next one, the Greenwood Cup. They said after the race, classic or turf, but Callens was sort of like sounded more like turf, having said he's worried about the pace and distance in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I wanted to mention that. The way he sound, that's still up in the air if he even goes to Del Mar. But the way they were sounding after the race, I just wanted to mention it sort of sounded like Callens, if it was up to him, the turf would be the better option.
One of the easiest horses in the game to root for in the Breeders' Cup Turf, he will be one of the easiest horses to bet against because he will be a significantly shorter price than he deserves to be.
Wait a minute, you didn't love that fourth? You didn't love that fourth at Ellis on his last turf start? I'm sorry, never mind.
I can't. I will say Wesley Ward, I think, has changed a lot of American racing for what he's done over the years. He's a great trainer, and it's a lot of fun to see. But he will never live down next losing a 7-furlong 62.5 claimer where he went to the lead and stopped, and having him claimed out of there and then rattled off $1 million+ in wins going long on the dirt. But hey, everybody has their days. I know we make plenty of mistakes as horse players. Vance, anything on the way out the door?
Not so much about last week, but I am looking forward to it. A very exciting weekend coming up. As you mentioned, a lot of that graded action at Aqueduct. Churchill's got some good races, and St. Anita is back opening for their fall meet, and it should be a very interesting collection of graded stakes we'll be witnessing.
Yes, the ACAC and the Lucas Classic Saturday night at Churchill. Word getting out gradually that Twin Spires has gone deep on the bench to find somebody to cover those races. We will keep you waiting to find out about that until a little bit later in the week.
We got an A-lister coming in to work Saturday night at Churchill. That's
yeah,
the
we'll
word
see
on
about
the
that.
street.
A-list. We'll see if that's the word Sunday morning. Gentlemen, thanks again for joining me here on the Racing Roundtable, and for Ashley Anderson, who I am deputizing for, and Darren, who you'll see later in the week. Be sure to head to twinspires.com, hit up some of those tournaments that are gaining popularity and can earn you a way into the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge later this fall. For Vance and James, Nick here. Until next time, best of luck.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With Twin Spires, you can place your bets with confidence. Whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power, and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with Twin Spires. And now you can race to victory with Twin Spires tournaments.